I thought spending the weekend at my family's mountain cabin would be peaceful. I was wrong. By Sunday morning, I was in handcuffs, facing felony charges, and staring at a woman who had no idea she'd just declared war on the wrong person. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm about to tell you how one vindictive HOA president learned the hard way that some battles you just can't win. The morning mist was still clinging to the pine trees when I heard the aggressive pounding on my cabin door. It was 7 a.m. on a Sunday, and I'd driven up to Pine Ridge Estates the night before to finally tackle the renovations on my late grandfather's cabin. This place had been in my family for 30 years. Long before there even was a homeowners association. Open up, this is the police. I stumbled to the door in my pajamas, completely confused. Through the window, I could see two sheriff's deputies flanked by a woman I'd never seen before. She was middle-aged, wearing a pristine tracksuit, and had the kind of self-satisfied smirk that immediately put me on edge. "Ma'am, we need to see some identification," the first deputy said as I opened the door. "Of course, but what's this about?" I asked, reaching for my wallet. The woman stepped forward, her voice dripping with authority. "I'm Linda Morrison, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. This individual has been illegally occupying this property. I have documentation proving this cabin has been abandoned for over 2 years, making it subject to HOA seizure under our community bylaws." My blood ran cold. "Excuse me, this is my family's property. My grandfather built this cabin in 1994. Linda's laugh was sharp and calculating. "Your grandfather, Harold Chen, defaulted on HOA fees totaling $8,400. According to our courts, this property was legally transferred to the HOA 6 months ago due to non-payment. You're trespassing." I stared at the official-looking documents she thrust toward me. The letterhead was legitimate. The signatures looked real. But something felt fundamentally wrong. My grandfather had been meticulous about his finances. Even in his final years battling dementia, I'd helped manage his affairs. There was no way he'd let HOA fees accumulate like that. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you'll need to come with us," the second deputy said, his hand moving toward his handcuffs. "Ms. Morrison has filed charges for criminal trespass and destruction of property." "Destruction of property?" I nearly shouted. I was fixing a loose board on the porch. Linda's eyes gleamed. "Unauthorized modifications to HOA property. That's a felony in this county." As the cold metal clicked round my wrists, I caught Linda taking photos of me with her phone, probably already composing her social media post about catching the dangerous trespasser. She had no idea that her perfectly orchestrated morning was about to become her worst nightmare. You see, Linda Morrison had made one crucial mistake in all her research about the Chen family cabin. In all her scheming to acquire prime lakefront property, she'd never bothered to look up what Sarah Chen did for a living. The ride to the county jail gave me time to think. My grandfather's cabin sat on 2 acres of pristine lakefront property, easily worth $2.3 million in today's market. The HOA had been pressuring him to sell for years, especially after the new luxury development went in across the lake. But Grandpa, Harold, was stubborn. That land represented his American dream, his escape from the poverty he'd fled in Taiwan. At the jail, they fingerprinted me, took my mugshot, and I made my one phone call, not to a lawyer. I had something better in mind. "Marcus, it's Sarah. I need you to meet me at the Pine Ridge County Courthouse tomorrow morning. Bring everything." My bill was set at $15,000, which Linda had specifically requested, probably assuming I couldn't pay it. She was wrong about that too. By evening, I was out and driving back to the city, my mind racing with plans. That night, I spread out every document I had about my grandfather's property across my dining room table. The original deed from 1994, his will, the property tax records, showing payments current through last year, and most importantly, the letter I'd found in his desk after he passed away last spring. The letter was addressed to the Pine Ridge HOA, dated just 3 months before his death. In it, my grandfather formally disputed the HOA's authority over his property, citing the fact that he'd purchased the land and built the cabin years before the HOA was even established. He'd hired a lawyer and everything. Linda Morrison hadn't just stolen my family's property. She'd stolen it from a dying man who'd tried to fight back. But here's what Linda didn't know about me. I wasn't just Sarah Chen, grieving granddaughter. I was Sarah Chen, investigative journalist for the State Tribune, winner of 3 press awards, and someone who'd spent the last 8 years exposing corruption in local government. I'd built my career on stories exactly like this one. By Monday morning, I had a plan that would expose Linda Morrison's scheme and destroy her credibility forever. But first, I had to survive my arraignment, where Linda would be sitting in the gallery, probably expecting to watch me crumble under the weight of her false charges. She had no idea that I was about to turn her perfect crime into the biggest legal disaster of her life. As I pulled into the courthouse parking lot at 8:30 a.m., I saw Linda's white Mercedes in the front row, vanity plate reading Hopers. She was probably inside already, reveling in her victory. What she didn't see was the unmarked van parked across the street, or the man in the suit walking toward the courthouse entrance with a briefcase full of evidence. That would change everything. Linda Morrison thought she'd won the war before I even knew we were fighting. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The arraignment was supposed to be a formality, Linda's victory lap, before I accepted some plea deal and disappeared from her perfect little community forever. She sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor, radiating smug confidence as I approached the defendant's table with my court-appointed attorney. What Linda couldn't see was my phone buzzing with messages from Marcus Rivera, my research assistant at the Tribune. The messages that would change everything. "Not guilty, Your Honor," I said when asked for my plea. Linda's confident smile faltered slightly when Judge Patricia Williams set my trial date for just 6W. Eeks out, unusually fast for a criminal case. But then again, Judge Williams had always been efficient, especially when it came to property disputes. I'd covered several of her cases over the years. After court, Linda cornered me in the hallway, her voice low and threatening. "Miss Chen, I think you're making a mistake. The HOA is prepared to be reasonable. Accept the plea deal, pay restitution for damages, and we can make this whole thing go away quietly." I looked her straight in the eye. "Linda, I think you're the one who's made a mistake." Her laugh was sharp. "Really? And what mistake is that? You never asked what I do for a living." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face, but she quickly recovered, straightening her shoulders. "It doesn't matter what you do. The law is the law, and you broke it." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I worked around the clock. What we discovered about Linda Morrison and the Pine Ridge HOA was worse than I'd imagined. The pattern was always the same: elderly homeowners, usually recent widows or widowers, would allegedly fall behind on HOA fees. The amounts were always suspiciously large: $6,000, $8,000, sometimes more. The HOA would claim they'd sent notices, but the homeowners' families never received them. By the time anyone realized what was happening, The property had already been legally transferred to the HOA through their bylaws. In the past 3 years, Linda's HOA had acquired 7 properties this way, all prime lakefront lots, the total value over $12 million. But the real breakthrough came when Marcus hacked into the HOA's email server. What we found there would destroy Linda Morrison's entire operation. "Sarah, you need to see this," Marcus said, calling me at midnight on a Tuesday. I found email chains between Linda and someone named Robert Castellanos. They're not just stealing properties. They're systematically targeting elderly homeowners whose families live out of state. My grandfather fit the profile perfectly. Widowed, aging, family in California. Linda had been watching him for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. The emails were devastating. Linda writing to Robert, "Harold Chen's granddaughter lives in San Francisco. She only visits twice a year. Perfect target." Robert's response, "Agree. Begin the fee accumulation process. I'll prepare the forged default notices." Robert Castellanos, it turned out, was Linda's business partner and the HOA's treasurer. Together, they'd created a system to manufacture fake HOA fee violations, forge default notices, and steal properties from families who lived too far away to fight back effectively. But they'd made one crucial error. They kept records of everything. By week 4 of my trial preparation, I had enough evidence to file a federal lawsuit against the Pine Ridge HOA for racketeering, fraud, and elder abuse. But I decided to wait. I wanted Linda to feel secure, confident, absolutely certain she'd won. I wanted her to walk into that courtroom believing she held all the cards. The night before my trial, Linda called me personally. Her voice was honey sweet with full concern. "Sarah, honey, I've been thinking about our situation. You seem like a nice girl who just got caught up in something unfortunate. What if I talk to the prosecutor about reducing the charges? Maybe just a fine and community service." "That's very generous of you, Linda. I think so too. All you have to do is sign a document acknowledging that the property rightfully belongs to the HOA, and we can put this whole ugly business behind us." There it was, the final piece of evidence I needed. Linda was so desperate to legitimize her theft that she was willing to offer me a deal that would legally validate her crimes. "Can I think about it overnight?" I asked. "Of course, but Sarah, honey, this offer expires when court starts tomorrow morning. After that, I'm afraid you'll have to face the full consequences of your choices." After I hung up, I called my editor at the Tribune. "Jim, remember how you said you wanted a story that would make people's jaws drop? I've got one for you. How big are we talking?" "Sarah, page 1, above the fold. Federal criminal conspiracy. Millions in stolen property. And the best part, it's all going to come out in open court tomorrow." Jesus, Sarah, are you sure about this? I looked at the boxes of evidence stacked in my living room. Emails, financial records, property documents, and recorded phone calls. Linda Morrison had handed me the story of my career in a silver platter. "Jim, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow, Linda Morrison would walk into that courtroom expecting to watch me crumble under her perfectly crafted case. Instead, she was about to watch her entire criminal empire collapse in spectacular fashion. But I still had one more surprise waiting for her. Something even Marcus didn't know about. Something that would prove Linda Morrison wasn't just a thief. She was a killer. The evidence was hidden in my grandfather's medical records. Records that told a story of an elderly man who died not from natural causes, but from the stress and heartbreak of watching strangers try to steal everything he'd worked his entire life to build. Linda Morrison thought she'd committed the perfect crime. Tomorrow, She learned that there's no such thing. The courtroom was packed. Linda Morrison sat in the front row, flanked by Robert Castellanos and their high-priced attorney, James Whitmore from the city's most prestigious law firm. She wore a conservative navy suit and her most sympathetic expression. The grieving community leader forced to prosecute a dangerous criminal. She had no idea that in the back row sat Agent Patricia Dawson from the FBI's white-collar crime division, or that the court stenographer had been replaced with someone from the state attorney general's office. The people called Linda Morrison to the stand, announced prosecutor David Nash, clearly confident this would be a quick victory. Linda approached the witness stand with practiced grace, her hands steady on the Bible as she swore to tell the truth. If only she knew what truth was about to be revealed. Ms. Morrison, please tell the court about your position with the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. I've been the president for 4 years. It's a thankless job, really. But someone has to protect property values and ensure our community standards are maintained. Linda's testimony was polished, rehearsed. She painted herself as a dedicated volunteer who discovered that Harold Chen had abandoned his property and accumulated thousands in unpaid fees. She presented her forged documents with theatrical precision, explaining how the HOA's bylaws clearly authorized property seizure for non-payment, and when you encountered the defendant at the property that morning, she was hostile and aggressive. She claimed to own the property, but couldn't provide any legitimate documentation. I was genuinely afraid for my safety. I watched the jury carefully. They seemed convinced Linda was good at this. Then it was time for cross-examination. My attorney, Marcus Rivera, who'd taken the bar exam just to represent me in this case, stood up with our boxes of evidence. Ms. Morrison, you testified that Harold Chen accumulated $8,400 in unpaid HOA fees. Can you tell the court over what time period these fees accumulated? Approximately 18 months. That would be from January 2023 through June 2024, correct? Marcus pulled out a stack of documents. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence items 1 through 47. Harold Chen's bank statements showing automatic payments to the Pine Ridge HOA for $150 per month, every month, from 2020 through his death in March 2024. Linda's face went pale. Whitmore jumped up. Objection. Where did defense obtain these financial records? Mr. Chen's granddaughter inherited all his financial accounts. Your Honor, these records are legitimate bank documents. Judge Williams examined the statements. Objection overruled. The witness may answer. Marcus continued. Ms. Morrison, if Mr. Chen was paying his HOA fees every month through automatic bank transfer, how did he accumulate $8,400 in unpaid fees? Linda's composed mask began to crack. There must be some accounting error. Perhaps the bank records are incomplete. Are they incomplete, Ms. Morrison? Or are these incomplete? Marcus held up the HOA's financial records. Because according to your own bookkeeping, you recorded receiving Harold Chen's payments every month, then systematically transferred those payments into a separate account marked acquisition fund. The courtroom erupted. Judge Williams banged her gavel for order, but Marcus wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording for the court. Linda's voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear from the phone call she'd made to me the night before. All you have to do is sign a document acknowledging that the property rightfully belongs to the HOA, and we can put this whole ugly business behind us. Ms. Morrison, were you attempting to coerce the defendant into signing fraudulent documentation? Linda's attorney was on his feet. Your Honor, this recording was made without consent. In California, yes, Marcus replied smoothly. But Ms. Morrison called from Nevada, a one-party consent state. The recording is perfectly legal. Judge Williams looked intrigued. Continue. Counselor Marcus pulled out his laptop. Your Honor, I'd like to present email evidence obtained through a federal warrant. He clicked play on an audio file, Linda's voice reading from her own emails. Harold Chen's granddaughter lives in San Francisco. She only visits twice a year. Perfect target. Begin the fee accumulation process. I'll prepare the forged default notices. The old man called yesterday, crying about losing his property. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The last email made Linda look physically ill. In it, she'd written to Robert Castellanos. Harold Chen had another heart episode yesterday. Doctor says stress is killing him faster than his condition. Good. Dead owners can't fight back. My grandfather had died 2 weeks after that email. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Linda Morrison quietly sobbing. But I still had one more revelation. Marcus turned to face Linda directly. Ms. Morrison, you testified that you've been HOA president for 4 years. But according to state incorporation records, the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association was dissolved in 2019 for failure to file required paperwork. Would you care to explain how you've been president of a non-existent organization? Linda's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, then stood up. Your Honor, my client invokes her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Too late. The damage was done. Judge Williams called a recess. But I could see the jury's faces. They weren't just convinced of my innocence. They were horrified by what they'd witnessed. During the break, I watched FBI agent Dawson approach Linda Morrison. The handcuffs came out before Linda's attorney could object. Linda Morrison, you're under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and violation of federal RICO statutes. As they led Linda away, she looked back at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed. This is bigger than just me. That's when Robert Castellanos stood up from the gallery and began walking quickly toward the exit. He didn't make it. Two more FBI agents were waiting for him at the courthouse doors. But even as I watched Linda's empire crumble, I knew she was right about one thing. This was bigger than just her. The Pine Ridge case was about to expose a nationwide network of HOA fraud that had stolen millions from elderly homeowners across 12 states. And I was going to be the one to tell that story. Judge Williams reconvened court 30 minutes later. The prosecutor, clearly shaken by the revelations, stood up and made a motion I'd been hoping to hear. Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the people moved to dismiss all charges against Sarah Chen, but Judge Williams had one more surprise. Double quotes, Miss Chen. Would you please approach the bench? I walked forward, unsure what was coming. Miss Chen, I've been a judge for 23 years, and I've never seen a more clear-cut case of malicious prosecution and fraud. Not only are all charges against you dismissed, but I'm issuing an emergency restraining order preventing any member of the dissolved Pine Ridge HOA from interfering with your property rights. She paused, looking directly at me. I'm also referring this matter to the State Attorney General for investigation of similar cases statewide. The gavel came down with finality. But as I walked out of that courthouse, I realized my fight was just beginning, because Linda Morrison's final words kept echoing in my mind. This is bigger than just me, and I was about to discover just how right she was. 6 months after that courtroom victory, I was standing in my grandfather's renovated cabin, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. The property was legally mine again. Linda Morrison was serving a federal sentence of 12 years, and Robert Castellanos had pleaded guilty to avoid trial. But the story was far from over. My investigation into the Pine Ridge HOA had exploded into something none of us expected. The FBI task force I'd inadvertently helped create had identified similar schemes in over 200 communities across 15 states. The total value of stolen properties exceeded $340 million. Linda Morrison hadn't been a small-time criminal. She'd been part of a sophisticated nationwide network targeting elderly homeowners, orchestrated by a company called Community Asset Management Solutions, CAMS. The mastermind behind CAMS was someone I'd never suspected: James Whitmore, Linda's own attorney, the same man who'd sat in that courtroom watching his carefully constructed empire crumble, all because they'd targeted the wrong journalist's family. Whitmore had been recruiting HOA presidents across the country, providing them with legal templates, forged documents, and step-by-step instructions for property theft. In exchange, CAMS took a 40% cut of every stolen property's value. My series of articles for the Tribune, titled "The HOA Heist," had won a Pulitzer Prize and led to congressional hearings on HOA reform. But more importantly, it had helped over 400 families recover properties that had been stolen from their loved ones. The knock on my cabin door that evening was gentle. Nothing like the aggressive pounding that had started this whole nightmare. Miss Chen, the woman standing on my porch, was elderly, maybe 75, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "I'm Margaret Sullivan. I drove here from Oregon because I had to thank you in person." She pulled out a photograph of a small beach cottage. "This was my husband's dream home. We saved for 30 years to buy it after he died. The Sea Vista HOA claimed we owed $12,000 in fees and took it from me. I thought I'd never see it again." Her eyes filled with tears. "Because of your story, the FBI investigated Sea Vista. Turned out they'd stolen properties from 17 families. I got my husband's cottage back last month." Margaret wasn't the first person to make this pilgrimage to my cabin. In the past 6 months, I'd received letters, emails, and visits from dozens of families whose loved ones had been victimized by HOA fraud. Each story was heartbreaking, but each recovery was a victory. The final twist in this story came 3 weeks ago, in a phone call that changed everything. "Miss Chen, this is Agent Patricia Dawson. We need to talk." "What is it, Patricia? Please tell me you haven't found another CAMS network." "It's bigger than that, sir. We've been analyzing financial records from all the cases, and we discovered something that's going to shock you." She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Your grandfather didn't die from natural causes, sir. His medical records show he was in perfect health for his age right up until the HOA harassment began. The stress of fighting Linda Morrison literally killed him." My hands started shaking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that under federal law, if criminal actions directly cause someone's death through extreme emotional distress, it can be prosecuted as voluntary manslaughter. We're reopening Harold Chen's case." "How is that possible?" "He died of heart failure, caused by extreme psychological stress from Linda Morrison's harassment. We have emails where she specifically mentioned that stress was killing him faster than his condition. That shows intent and awareness that her actions could cause his death." The room started spinning. My grandfather hadn't just been a victim of property fraud. He'd been murdered. 2 weeks later, Linda Morrison was indicted on federal manslaughter charges. The woman who thought she could steal my family's property with impunity was now facing life in prison. But here's the part that would have made my grandfather proud. I didn't let hatred consume me. I used this experience to create Something positive. The Harold Chen Foundation for Elder Justice now operates in 12 states, providing free legal assistance to elderly homeowners facing HOA disputes. We've prevented over 150 property thefts and helped families recover millions in stolen assets every time we save someone's home. I think about my grandfather and how proud he'd be that his little cabin by the lake became the catalyst for protecting other families from predators like Linda Morrison. The lake is peaceful tonight, just like Grandpa Harold always said it would be, but now it represents something more than family memories. It represents justice, resilience, and the power of truth to overcome even the most sophisticated criminal schemes. Linda Morrison thought she'd found the perfect victim, an elderly widower with family far away. She had no idea she was about to pick a fight with someone who'd spent her entire career exposing people exactly like her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice. And sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places, like a granddaughter who refused to let her family's legacy be stolen by a woman who thought she was untouchable. If you're facing HOA harassment or suspect elder abuse in your community, don't stay silent. Reach out to local authorities, contact investigative journalists, and remember that criminals like Linda Morrison count on their victims being isolated or intimidated to fight back. My grandfather couldn't fight back in the end, but his legacy lives on in every family we help, every predator we expose, and every property we save from fraudulent seizure. That's the real victory in this story. Not just that I got my cabin back, but that Harold Chen spirit of justice continues to protect families across the country. And Linda Morrison, she's got 12 years in federal prison to think about what happens when you underestimate the power of family, truth, and a journalist who refuses to back down. The sunset over Pine Ridge Lake has never looked more beautiful. If you or someone you know has experienced HOA fraud or elder abuse, please contact the Harold Chen Foundation for Elder Justice through our website. Remember, you're not alone in this fight. And justice is always possible when good people refuse to give up.